Hello, and welcome to another episode of Seddon and Laceys Comic Stash, or should I say, Comrade Seddon and Comrade Laceys Comrade Stash, as we
I've,
are
I've,
today.
I've kind of gone a bit red. I mean, it's not quite red, is it? But I've got a list close to red.
As we are today going into a deep dive on Batman Red, or not Batman,
Oh,
Superman Red
well,
Sun.
funny enough, I was going to say in this intro bit, I believe it's the first Superman story we're ever going to have done, and I was going to mention it's a departure from us normally playing when we're in DC in the world of Batman. But there you go. Didn't really need to.
Well,
The Freudian slip says it all, doesn't it?
but before we go to the motherland, we shall go to our corners and hit the reading corner music.
Hit that music.
Happiness is just around the corner.
What have you got in your reading corner? And I say that because we sneakily chatted beforehand and we're tag teaming one. So you're
We
going to get
did.
to go first and then we'll do our joint one afterwards.
Yes. So I had the elusive week off work, which meant I got to have a little read of some bits and pieces. And I went for a couple of issue ones of stuff that I was looking at in solicits that we went, ooh, let's have a look at those.
Yeah.
So
It's
the
nice,
first,
isn't it,
yes,
to do that? Like after our solicits ones, it is actually nice to, and quite often they're issue ones, aren't they? Because they're the things that tend to jump out. It's quite nice to actually hit them up and go, did our level of interest and excitement at the time pay off, or
was
was
it a
it a bit
kick
of a
in the
letdown?
tits?
Yeah, yeah.
So the first one is Bloodline, Daughter of Blade.
So,
You
carry
knew
on,
that as soon as there was a
carry on.
Blade thing, I was going to read it.
I mean, and again, I laugh. I do actually hope it's brilliant. I hope every comic book is brilliant. But I do remember from the solicits you bringing this one up and me just thinking, oh, I think he's back to three-legged horse in this race.
That three-legged horse was right. This is
Yeah,
not good. There, it's obviously Blade's daughter, but she doesn't know at the beginning that Blade's her dad.
yeah.
But she can sense vampires and is terrible at school because she's sensing vampires and going out stabbing them with her mum.
Man, if I knew that was an excuse you could have used when you were not doing well in school, I'd have been rocking that all the way through my school years. Yeah, yeah, I know I should have done better on that test, but I sense vampires. It's messing me up, man.
Exactly. And obviously you get Blade right at the end because you obviously need that big sort of there he is to carry you through. This is just dull, and I won't be carrying on with this
Well,
one.
Well, it's a shame, isn't it? Because like, comic books are littered with legacy characters and like those familial connections, and there are some great examples of it. And I do think like as time goes by, I mean, in our lifetime we've seen reboots aplenty and it be the same character, but I do think there is something in getting a foothold of the younger version for the younger generation.
Yeah,
However, some just feel like going in that they're going to be a bit we don't really got any ideas. Can someone knock out a story about this guy's daughter or son, or fill in the blanks? And I just kind of had that feeling going into this one.
yeah. It very. I reckon there is an audience for it, and I think there is a market for it, but that market isn't me and what I want in the
Yeah.
Blade world.
I also wondered as well because we know that because we've done it in solicits about the new Blade series coming as, and I almost, I mean, maybe this transitions into it, but it almost feels weird trying to push the legacy character with a main series of the main character coming so close afterwards. Almost like they'd lost faith in it before they'd published it, so they thought they'd be better get someone else in the chamber very, very quickly.
Yeah. So yeah, not so much a hit on that one, and yeah, won't be carrying that on. I don't think.
I think that's 1-0 in the berating some of the solicits you pick. I can't wait to get back to some of the other things that I've scoffed at. Comic snob that I am.
And the second number one is the one that you
Which is one we
also.
both picked, wasn't it? We both picked
Yeah,
this out in the solicits as something we were very interested in, and partially because of the, let's say, the franchise, partially because of the characters, but I think for both of us as well, the visual look of what we were seeing in the solicits was an attractor for both of us.
Yes, so it is the new Guardians of the Galaxy run.
Yes.
So, as I've talked a lot to start with, I will let you open the floor with this one.
Well, the writing team, being the same writing team that we've mentioned a couple of times, and it being Lansing and Kelly who were doing Captain America, that was something that kind of tweaked my interest as well.
Mm.
This dropped a bit earlier on Marvel Unlimited. They sometimes do this, don't they?
Mm.
Sometimes they drop a issue one ahead of time, so it's all like, oh, it was almost like a little treat as well. So I was going into it excited, getting it as an extra treat, and I can't help but feel like when I exited it, I was less excited than I was going in, which is a bit harsh because it looks beautiful. I want to say that. I think the art in
Mm.
it is fantastic, and those character redesigns still look really great in it. But I think the problem with this is probably less about how it was written for me, and it probably was a little bit more about my excitement levels. So when I saw those new look characters, and very very Western, isn't it? Like a
Yeah.
very Western stylings of them, and on the solicit, it kind of suggested that we might be getting something where the Guardians are cast adrift from whence they've ever been before, and maybe they are stuck on a planet, or certainly that's how it went in my head. And this was going to be a much more uh, focused in experience of just them, or just them and the supporting cast. And I went into the issue, and there's a bit of that, isn't there? You know, they do lean into the
Mm.
Western town and a little bit of kind of gallivanting to and from places,
Yeah.
but they've still got spaceships and they could still just jog on to another planet. And I just felt like maybe in my mind I'd built up what I thought it was going to be. I thought it was going to be a cross between when they did like Planet Hulk, so they took Hulk totally out of where he was and luzzed him onto a planet where he was static on that planet for a while, and they got to tell some really interesting stories. And a Western using the Guardians characters, and then when I come out the other end, I just went. It just felt like another Guardian story. It didn't feel
Yeah.
like it did anything unique or interesting. And as I say, the solicits for me had suggested that we were going to get something very very different, and I just don't think we did.
Yeah. I was thinking sort of similar to you that we were going to get that they are stuck on this planet or
Yeah,
wherever whatever it was
yeah,
going to be that was this Western themed
yeah,
desert thing. And I was thinking you can remember the old 80s cartoon Brave Star. I was expecting sort of Guardians of the Galaxy doing
yep,
Brave Star sort of
yep.
thing where Quill would
Mixed
be
with mixed with the good, the bad, the ugly, or something like that to give it a
yeah,
bit of grit as well. Yeah,
yeah, where Quill would be like he's the sheriff of this place because they've been stuck there for so long, and Star Lord being Star Lord ends up with this, or like Gamora
yeah,
is the sheriff, and there's that, and it would be something there,
yeah,
and that first issue, it's basically, oh look, we're coming in, we're saving some people, we're jumping on the ship, and we're getting out. And I'm like,
yeah,
but you've done this countless times in countless
yeah.
runs. Did you need this Western redesign to do the same thing that we've already had?
Well, it's odd,
And
isn't it? Because I think both of us generally have enjoyed when they've done this in other runs. That's kind of their mark, isn't it?
yeah,
But because I decided in my own head we were getting something different, it just felt underwhelming. Whereas maybe if it hadn't, and like they do, they are in their kind of Western costumes, and it does look cool. But it looks cool to the point of going, well, in the next issue, if they're not on there, why aren't they changing into their normal clothes or whatever?
yeah,
Yeah, I like that idea, by the way, of Gamora as a sheriff. In that world, I kind of want Quill to be in the bar drunk every night because he's not the sheriff and that sort of thing.
yeah,
But I, as I said, I like the writers, I really do, and I probably will stick with it and give it a few more issues because I think they can probably tell a good Guardians run. But yeah, the shame of it for me is I'd built up in my head what it was going to be, and it isn't that, and
mm,
I don't know whether that's on me, probably, or also maybe, and I won't even go with the creative team here, possibly the marketers and the way that it was marketed.
yeah.
But yeah, just a bit of a shame. And yeah, for one that I picked out as a real highlight, I will probably read it just to see now, but I'm not going into issue 2 with any sort of glee, enjoyment, or excitement.
Yeah, with this, it was going to be one of those that I was going to read it as it came up on the app because I
Yeah,
was like, oh, got New Guardian, New Guardian. Now I'll probably wait till the rest of the first 6 are on and then
yep, same here. It's a trade
give
read
that
for
a
me
read.
now.
And then
Yeah,
if that doesn't grab me, then I'll just bin it off.
yeah,
But it really didn't. It again, like you say, I think both of us have gone in after reading the solicit and the imagery that we saw and everything like that,
yeah,
thinking it's going to be one thing, and turns out
yeah.
it's just
Some
the
something
same
new,
as what we've
something
had before.
different, but with familiar characters. Whereas what
Yeah,
we got is something the same with familiar characters, which as I said earlier, there's a market for it, and often I would have liked it, but yeah, just I wish it was more different than it actually is.
yeah. But obviously, because we are a couple, I think there's Lauren issue 3 is now out. I mean, in the shops. I mean, they're
Yeah,
because we're that far behind on the app. If
yeah,
you've read it and it picks up,
yeah. Let
pop
us
that
know.
in the comments and let us know.
Or even if you just
Um,
read the first issue, let us know what you think of that first issue. Are we wrong? Is there a blazingly great comic book in there, and we just set our expectations either too high or in the wrong direction?
yes. So
Bit of a shame that,
that
wasn't it? Bit of a damp
I
squib of a
know,
reading corner, wasn't it?
I know, but because as I said, I've been off this week from work. We have new things and stuff away from DC and Marvel in coming weeks.
Yeah. And I know what some of them are, and they're brilliant.
So, shall we go to Mavarash?
Yes. I can't do accents though, so you're going to have to hold up the accent side of it.
As we are on our way to Elseworlds and Superman Red Sun.
Before we
Sup-
get into the Superman y thing, before we do that
yes,
screed, how familiar are you with Mark Miller, who's the writer for this? Or how
it's
familiar were
a
you going in?
it's a name that I know. But again, with a lot of the things, as you know, with me, I
Yeah,
am terrible with looking at who writes stuff.
he is terrible. For anyone who hasn't watched previous, he's terrible. We need to help this boy. I would say that he's in kind of the pantheon of modern superstar writers, and when I say
Mm,
modern, last kind of 20 years superstar writers, and I think it's debatable, and not necessarily everyone like wants him up there, but certainly I think impact wise, he's had some real successes at Marvel, especially. I would say probably really cut his teeth and made his name at Marvel. Did some of kind of the big crossovers for them, but probably for the wider world, he's probably more known as the creator of Kick-Ass, the creator of Wanted, the creator of Huntsman. Is it Huntsman? Yeah,
yeah,
the Tarrant and Edgerton thing. So he has a lot of properties that have and all done under his Miller World banner. That was at certain points sort of primarily being produced under Image, but went to a lot of different publishers. And he has, and quite a few years ago now, he signed like an exclusive deal with Netflix to create stuff through there. He did. Oh, what is that TV? Oh God, here we go. Terrible memory, boy. TV show on Netflix, family of superheroes. Vamp, sing a song while I look it up. It's not a bad song. That he's actually done quite well there. Still going, still going. Actually, I might just never look this up and wait for that. Oh God, this is Jupiter's Legacy. Sorry, which was really good, but unfortunately got cancelled after one season. But so yeah, I would say that's kind of where he's latterly known. But in Marvel, did a lot around the starting of the Ultimate line.
Mm.
Very big in that. Did Civil War. That was Mark Miller, which we
Ah,
did.
yes.
Yeah, and one of the other things he's particularly famous for is a run on Wolverine, which I won't say is Elseworlds, but it kind of plays with I think it was written so it could have kind of been Elseworldsy, but Enemy of
Mm.
the State, which is one of his big ones, where Wolverine gets brainwashed and starts killing people that in comic book world he shouldn't be. So yeah, he's got quite the pedigree, I would
Yeah.
say,
So
and I
yeah. So
like him a lot. I like his stuff a lot. Doesn't always hit with me. Sometimes can I don't know how to describe this best. Sometimes can be up his own arse a bit. Sometimes I think he thinks he's the master
being
of the
too clever.
world. Yeah, yeah. But in general, I think I'll take a bit of that because when he does get it spot on, I think he does some fantastic stories.
And obviously, anyone who has known us on this channel, we don't often do much on the world of Superman.
No.
So you know,
So we
going.
went for an Elseworld Superman.
Well, we're gonna start somewhere that's so completely random. So this is 3 issues. They are bigger issues than your standard
Yeah, about 50
page
pages,
count.
most of them, aren't they?
Yeah. Um, Obviously, first things first, before we go through the synopsis of the story and all that jazz, imagery on how this looks, especially from like the cover perspective, because I read the single issues, not the collective.
Yeah, same here. Single issues for me.
The cover art and stuff is amazing on this because it's so different and so out of
Yeah.
place with everything else that you see in comic books.
It would
But
stand out on the shelf, wouldn't
perfect,
it?
yeah, but perfect for the subject matter because it does look like Russian propaganda posters.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I think as a design piece, yes, I think you're spot on. I think it's got a unique, distinctive look, but a unique, distinctive look that smacks to the era and some of the parts that the story are playing with. And the Superman because he's Superman. Um, I like his renditions, especially on the covers, because he has that look of old school comic Superman, which we'll get into the era that this plays in, so it makes sense, but still feels uber modern as well with it, I think.
Mm. So yeah, so it's one of those of because I've seen this in shops and stuff, and I've looked at the cover and gone, that looks interesting, or you know, the art on it looks good, but because of it
It's
being
quite a
Superman,
sorry.
I don't jump in on it. But you know, us doing this has meant I did.
Yeah, it's quite a grabbing premise as well, isn't it? When you sort of say
Yeah,
that. So not only is artistically, and I think even if I think a lot of us would have made a leap with something that's called Superman Red Sun as to what it might be about, but you're under no illusions by seeing the covers and you know what you're signing up for. And yeah, as I say, I think as a premise, even if you're not a Superman fan, which we attest to not being, the fact that we don't read much of it, this felt like a good starting point because it was going to be Superman with a spin.
yeah. See the art inside the pages. The quality is very, very good in this. Sometimes you get the cover art, you see stuff and go, but you got an amazing artist do that, but God, they sucked ass during the actual issue. But the art style is awesome in this, and it again plays so well in the subject matter.
Yeah,
A lot
yeah.
of it looking very, as I said, like Russian propaganda of the time. Um,
But while
Lots
still
of
having, I
bold
think,
reds and stuff, and
lilts of like art of some of the eras they play in as well. So yeah, you're right. It's got that Russian lean, but it feels almost like a period piece at certain
mm,
points. Because I mean, if these pages were being produced, let's go back to kind of the 50s and 60s where some of this story takes place. I think if this art was being produced in the 50s or 60s, you'd probably go best artist ever because it was leaps and bounds above what was being done. But of course, with technology now and what they can do with inking and colors, but yeah, at no point did it ever feel like it wasn't an homage to both of those things. So you almost got loads of like the Russian propaganda, but a real early American comic book feel for me.
yeah. And so, shall we go through the story?
Yeah, starting in 1953.
Kal-El lands in Ukraine, not America. That is our premise to start this on a farm. Helping Ukrainian farmers lift things and do all that good stuff. We don't see any of that, but it's sort
No.
of put across that is what is
Yeah.
happening and it has happened.
It's quite
Um,
nice, wasn't it, that it didn't feel like it had to have 50 pages to get us from landing to where he is. That's very
yeah,
much told quite quickly in panels, isn't it? And it appears a couple of times because there's some relevance to it as it goes on. But to get that origin almost fast forward, because everyone knows Superman's origin, and admittedly, this Superman's origin is different, but it's different because of where he landed, not really anything else, isn't it?
yeah. Lex is married to Lois, and he's been tasked with stopping Superman because Superman is basically Stalin's weapon.
Well,
Is
yeah, I mean,
how it's been.
you say about the propaganda. I mean, it's very much early doors, isn't it? Is Stalin and Mother Russia are just going, we've got this super weapon, i.e., Superman. Do something about it, America.
Yeah,
Whereas, I think in other maybe stories you tend to have the superhero taking a while, or the powerful character that rather than superhero taking a while to be revealed. But yes, it was very much being used as a propaganda piece for Russia and as a threat. So
yeah,
stick your nuclear deterrent. We've got this guy.
yeah. Um, we have Superman ends up being sort of flying around doing Superman-y things, but for Mother Russia, saving small children, stopping boats capsizing and trains crashing,
Quite
and
key as well, isn't it? That everything we're seeing is him preventing harm to people rather than, and you said it, like this kind of concept of a weapon, but it's not like they're going like go and destroy New York. He is doing Superman-y things, if that's a real word.
he's being
Yeah,
Superman, but for Mother Russia, and
yeah.
still saving lives and saving the day. Um, the Sputnik starts to fall from the sky, and he goes and saves Metropolis from imminent disaster of Sputnik falling on it.
And it was a Lex plan, wasn't it? Lex
Yeah,
arranged for Sputnik. So Lex is basically, if you picture Lex in the Lex we probably know, he's kind of that again, isn't he? But he's being paid primarily by the American government at this point to stop Superman. But it's quite clear that he doesn't really care about the America Russia thing. He cares about getting paid lots of money to beat, and he'll often refer to in this story as we go forward, the alien.
yeah.
For him, it's a competition of, I guess, wits against power, and one of his tricks is to try and destroy the city that he's in, knowing or trying to get Superman to save it.
At this point, Superman goes back to Moscow and has Superman Day.
Yes.
And during the celebrations, our great and fearless leader, Joseph Stalin, is poisoned.
And we get introduced here, don't we, to Diana Prince. I don't think she's using Prince in this, but Diana, who
Yes.
more widely known as Wonder Woman, and Stalin's son is throughout this the leader of. I can't remember if it's the
KGB.
KGB or the NKVD. Either way,
He starts
one
as
of
the
the
NKVD, but then he's
yeah,
in the KGB later on.
and he's kind of the illegitimate son of Stalin, isn't he? So
Yeah.
he has a thirst for power, and Stalin does acknowledge him, but it's kind of a bit of a, you go over there, we can't really talk about we've given you a nice job,
Yeah.
but you're not going to be my son, and I'm not going to pass stuff on to you.
During this time, Lex makes Superman 2, or US Bizarro.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, they have a scrap in London, and
Yeah, coming over here, messing up our things.
I know Superman.
That's why people
Me,
voted for Brexit.
that's no. We all know the reason they voted for Brexit was to stop, those people not using safety devices
Superman
on roofs.
on roofs. Yeah, yeah. Superman coming over here, not using safety devices on roofs. Outrageous.
Superman meets up with his childhood sweetheart, but she says that she's so poor and so hungry because she, like everyone else, came to Stalin's funeral as a pilgrimage for Mother Russia.
Yep.
And Superman notices that everyone is suffering and is poor and is hungry.
Yeah, I mean, this is, I think, probably for me the first admission in the story around because you've been following Superman doing Russian Superman things and the Lex story, but without really having much questioning as to does Superman believe in the communist Stalinist ways, and I think this is where it really starts to hit Superman that not that Stalinism and communism is evil, but that not everyone
It,
is doing well in it. Yeah,
not everyone is equal as
yeah,
equal as
yeah,
is equal. So at this point, Superman decides that he will take Stalin's mantle and run Russia. We then get introduced to Brainiac, who, instead of taking Moscow, takes Stalingrad and puts it in a nice little snow globe.
one of those. I know. We said like we don't read a lot of Superman, but I've always loved Brainiac as a character, and primarily that I love that idea of the bottled cities, the mega computer going from civilizations that are going to end. I'm going to store it as data, and the idea in that world of data being shrink all those people down, put them in a bottle, and that data will perpetuate. I've always found him as a character and that as an idea fascinating.
So we find out that the Warsaw Pact has grown to the point where everywhere but the States and Chile
Yeah,
are part of
yeah,
the
go
Soviet
Chile.
Union.
Chile cannot be swayed from their capitalist ways, no matter how convincing the argument is.
And
I
we
didn't look it
hear
up. I meant to look up afterwards whether there was any particular reason why Chile. I don't, but I haven't. So, if anyone has Chile facts for us that might explain that, then drop them in the comments. But yeah, I did mean to do whether that was a random draw or whether they're famously don't join up for anything ever.
uh,
Famously independent, maybe.
uh, we see a Batman esque creature who comes in and bombs parts of Moscow as he stands against the party.
Yeah, in the issue before, we'd had a bit where Stalin's son, it's Piotr, or I guess
Petra.
Peter, anglicized, but tells a story about how early on in his career he'd had to kill the parents, and it had always haunted him, the look in the eye of the child, and it's presented very much in a Batman's origin kind of way, isn't it? And yeah,
Yeah.
fast forward X amount of years, because I mean, I think it's worth saying that this story has it's over just under 50 years, isn't it? I think it goes from 53 to about 2001, and
Yeah.
um, there aren't like there are sometimes big jumps. But they kind of fill in the blanks, and we have a big jump from kind of this stuff being discussed to, as you say, like the debut of a Batman in the streets of Russia.
Yes. So that's pretty much the issue one. So after this part of the story, how invested were you? Where were your head at this point?
I was enjoying it, but I would say caveated enjoyment. I think some of this, the premise, I think is really good. I said that at the beginning. I quite liked those nods to actual real time history. Like the Kennedys get a mention, and real world events get a mention, but with a bit of a spin. But I don't know. I don't know. I think I said on the last episode I'd read that 20th Century Men, which is taking real world events and really giving it a spin, but those real world events feeling a bit grittier and realer. There were parts in this issue where it felt a little bit washed over, almost. Come on, Russia in it.
Yeah.
And I think I would have actually liked them to have got a bit more in depth in that communism, Stalinism, socialism time of it. Now, again, bearing in mind, I realise this is a comic book for Superman and they want to sell it, but I think I'd have liked there to be a bit more explanation. Maybe sometimes it felt a little bit too surface level for me on that. You know,
Mm.
like when he meets Lana and she's standing in the queue for food, and he kind of goes, "Oh, well, I'll put you to the front of the queue." And other people go, "Oh, I'm starving as well." It felt maybe like a little bit too cheap shots, if that's
Yeah.
really what I mean. So yeah, there was a bit of reticence around that, but there was a lot I really liked in here. The only two things, and obviously I promise I'll explain. The only other two things that I wanted to cover that I really didn't like about this first issue, I really didn't like Lex Luthor, and I don't mean that in a I didn't like him. Boo hiss, he's a villain. I thought he was too much of a prick,
Mm.
and I know he is a prick, but he felt oddly,
Unnecessary.
yeah, like couldn't even be bothered. And I know they are trying to present him as this super intelligent person, which of course he is, but like couldn't be bothered with human interaction at all. And I felt like the story might have been better served if he become more like that over the three issues. So
Mm.
almost that obsession with the alien and Superman.
Made
Um,
him go
yeah,
internal,
made him go
internalize
uber
everything. Yeah.
uber prick.
Yeah.
And I didn't like the introduction of a Batman. It just felt again a bit forced. And okay, if you're going to do an alternate history on Elseworlds, you probably are going to do that. But I don't know. I didn't like it. By contrast, I love the introduction of Wonder Woman. I thought that was fantastic and it made sense because they put like kind of that political reason, the fact that the Soviet Union's growing and they would have relationships with Themyscira and they'd have parties and they'd meet, and that felt like natural, and I kind of got that being part of the world. But yeah, the Batman bit felt just a bit forced for me.
Yeah. Um, I'm with you, especially with like the bit about the Soviet and communism stuff, just basically being a very base level of Russia bad, communism bad, yay America, in that way that, if you looked at comics from the 70s and 80s when they were doing Cold War stuff,
Yeah,
it stinks of that. Whereas if Superman is still a hero in this, he's a hero of the
yeah,
people. Yes, we get it. You and him. It is seen as what Mother Russia was in those days was not the best way of doing it, but they don't put any light or any positives to what that
yeah,
is and how they do it. It's just, oh no, so they've got Superman, so it's fine, so everything's perfect. They just expand, but communism is terrible because there's people that are hungry.
yeah. That Soviet Union was felt in this issue to me like it was portrayed as fatally flawed, inherently wrong, and yeah, I'd say leaning into evil. Where America felt like it was being portrayed as overly aggressive, overly arrogant, and dumb. Now you can argue both of those things, certainly in that period of time, but I felt like it lacked kind of subtlety and nuance. They
Mm.
felt a little bit too smash you over the head with those as a theory.
And I too, in this shock horror, I didn't want Batman in this.
No, no. Or if I did, I wanted an American Batman. I think I'd have taken that. I think I'd have taken, where we've got like Lex being used as uh, America's attempt to find someone who using their brain can find things to beat Superman. I probably would have been much more accepting if coming out of issue one and going into issue two, we were seeing like the rise of a vigilante in America and kind of going, oh, if their paths ever cross, that will be exciting. But
Mm.
yeah, it's Superman Red Sun, not Batman Red Sun, I guess I was thinking in my head. And And that kind of idea of anyone would be Batman if their parents were shot in front of them, it felt a
Yeah,
bit flimsy to me. I really
yeah,
like Bizarro, by the way, in this. I thought
yes,
the introduction of him I thought was really good. Maybe there's a little bit of kind of hometown vibes of that part being done in London, but for the small amount of panels that Bizarro part of it got, I really did feel quite connected and quite sorry for Bizarro. You know, like he's been created. He has that Bizarro look, so he looks a bit like Superman, but kind of with zombified and very veiny and things like that. And I don't know, just some of the face expressions on the art and things like that. I don't know. I really kind of felt for him, and
mm,
I probably could go a 4 or 5 more pages of that. Although maybe it would have outstayed its welcome. But yeah, I was very keen on him in this first issue.
yeah. But I will say, but the point where it got to the end of the first issue, I was intrigued to see what Russian Superman was get up to.
Yeah, yeah. That's the thing. As much as I would say that I wasn't wow, there was enough here to make me want to see where we go next. Because, as you say, we've covered a lot of ground and a lot of years, for example, in this, and it is almost well put into the big chair. And bearing in mind, we knew we had 2 more issues. I'm going. Well, he's not just going to straight away go. I've changed my mind. Western is the way. Let's make everything brilliant and utopia in 3 pages. Because in theory, that's always been the crux of Superman with me. Is it's quite hard to get into his stories because, and dependent on the writer, it's very hard not to go. You can pretty much do everything, mate. Crack on and do
Yeah,
everything. That would be grand. So yeah, there was enough there to kind of go. Okay, we're going to go with it. And I mean, I think it's worth mentioning, like throughout this first issue and throughout the whole series, we do have the narration element, don't we? We have things like he'll sort of say, "Oh, that was the first time I ever met Wonder Woman." Oh, who could have known at that point where this would ultimately go? So you know they were teasing kind of their own
yeah,
path. So they had intimated that not everything will go swimmingly from this point onwards. So yeah, I think I'm with you. I was interested to go into the second issue to see what happens next. The only thing I was going to say before we move on from issue 1, there is a panel in here where there's riots going on in Russia, and I know it's kind of a small thing, but there's almost a small panel within panel about the riots. Oh, sorry, the riots going on in America. Sorry,
mm,
and there's a part where you've got a couple of Americans lifting or trying to not be squashed by a car that's on
that's
fire.
later on.
Oh, I
That
thought that was an
wasn't an
issue
issue one.
one.
No,
Oh,
that's
sorry. My bad. Sorry, I thought that was an issue 1.
no, that's
Great panel though.
yes, yes. I know
Spoilers.
exactly the one you're on about, but that's
Yeah.
in. I think it's the right at the beginning of three.
Oh bloody hell. Sorry.
Uh,
Forget I said that. When we get to issue 3, I'm going to pretend that never happens.
so
Lois. I wanted to ask you about Lois.
oh,
How are you
yes,
feeling about Lois in this first issue?
I get why she sort of has to be there because she's integral to the Superman mythos,
Yeah.
but a real pointless character in this.
I
At
couldn't
this point,
understand why she was staying with Lex at this point either. For someone who's always been portrayed as super smart, independent, etc., etc., etc. Again, I don't want it to feel like I'm railing and dunking on this, but she was really questionable for me because I just kind of went, well, I don't see Lois staying in this relationship, and there's a kind of a moment, isn't there, where she meets Superman and goes gooey for the rest of the story, and I know that's partially how it's portrayed in the comic books, but I don't know, it felt a bit out of place. It felt it. I guess I've got used to it to the most part. Seeing female characters portrayed better than this.
so
But
this stings of 1950s writing.
yeah, yeah. Which as if it's as an homage piece, then so be it. But I think there's your opportunity to do something. You can homage so much else, but you could do something else to that character. And by the same token, as I say, I didn't feel like we were getting that with Wonder Woman, nor with is it Hippolyta, the Wonder Woman's mum? I felt like they
Yeah.
were portrayed very differently.
So issue 2, starts with Wonder Woman as part of Superman's Russian Peace Corps.
By the way, whenever anyone says Wonder Woman, yourself included, I hear the TV show theme tune for Wonder Woman go. It goes in my head, and that's a good thing. So I love that theme tune.
So obviously they're, doing Superman-esque level things, saving trains, s- saving people, helping boats. At this point, Superman does mention the fact of, because of his level of power and the fact that he's there to stop everything and save everyone, that people are getting a little bit risk averse, not
Yeah, I
wearing
thought that was.
seat belts
We
and
joked
not
earlier, didn't we,
worrying.
about the things on the roofs of buildings, and to put this in timely fashion, it's only work in the UK. It's come off of a week where there was a question time episode. Again for non-UK watchers, it's generally where politicians are put in a TV studio and members of the public get to ask questions, and they had one this week where I grew up. And so I avidly watched it, but and it was talking about Brexit as we mentioned earlier, and there was just a hilarious moment where someone's kind of biggest complaint about being in the European Union or not being in the European Union is in the European Union they didn't follow the rules like we did, and their example was not putting railings up on roofs. So yeah, that's the sort of thing that these fools were doing. They were walking around on roofs without railings. How dare they? Because
Exactly.
Superman will save them.
Yes. Um, we then see that Batman is in talks with Petra and is in his underground lair, and they're plotting to take down Superman because Petra wants to take over the party.
Yeah. I guess take his
He,
rightful place in his mind, isn't it?
yeah,
It's almost like this is my legacy, and there are some bits in there, isn't there, around uh, effectively like him being disaffected because Stalin was his dad, albeit him being an illegitimate son, but that how much work he had to do to get to the position he'd got, and I guess as a bit of a flashback to some of the stuff we saw in the previous issue, the dark and bad things he had to do to win the approval, if he ever really
yeah,
got that, of his father. Whereas Superman just needed to do Superman things.
just needed to be.
Yeah, yeah,
So, as part of Batman's plan to take down Superman, he captures Wonder Woman and uses her for bait, um, using her lasso of truth, hoping to sap his powers. He and taking from Lex's constructions, using red sun lights to drain his power.
yeah.
As
Yeah,
the plan,
there's intimation all around this, isn't there? Like you have sort of background information such as other aliens had landed before and people have got crafts, and then there's um, like Russia kind of loaning some of the tech to Lex so that he can do some investigations, and that's where he figures out Red Sun probably would help him, and then they invent in a very superhero, not but especially Superman of those sort of days, like, oh, we'll just invent this thing that no one's ever heard of, a red sun
yeah,
machine, and plumb it in, and it works.
yeah, um, Superman is put into what's technically a bunker, but Batman was nice enough to give him, food supplies and things, so he won't starve or be in pain down there. Um,
Live
Superman,
forever, wasn't it? It was kind of
yeah,
that you'll be able to live forever, but never be able to achieve the stuff you know you can. That was almost the punishment for him, wasn't it? The
yeah,
yeah, look at what you could have won effectively, but I an ordinary man beat you.
yeah. Um, so Wonder Woman breaks her lasso of truth and frees herself after being convinced by Superman. She destroys the generators that run the lights, um, but in doing so, fucks herself over.
Yeah, quite a harsh image, isn't it? Like, and they don't do a ton with it, but we'd seen her as Wonder Woman as we knew, kind of all regal, and then you cut to this, and all of a sudden she goes from that to, I mean, I was gonna say haggard. I mean, haggard suggests like age, but more withered, I think, than
Yeah.
anything else. Suddenly the muscle tension is so strong, and her hair's gone sort of striking white, and she just seems hugely distressed.
Uh, Superman has a scrap with Batman, but Batman, instead of being lobotomized, which seems to be the party way, is that they will drone you if you speak out against the party.
Yeah, I've referred to as Superman robots, isn't it? Throughout this, you
Yeah,
start to see people with, and I actually do it like they're not headphones, but something like the size of this on the side of their head, and it suggested that effectively, they're being mind controlled or certainly incapacitated to the point where they won't cause any trouble anymore.
yeah. So instead of being lobotomized, Batman kills himself with a bomb that he'd swallowed earlier,
Yeah,
as you do.
yeah. I mean,
Uh,
we all do it before we leave the house, don't we? Just in case.
exactly. Uh, Pietro gets turned into one of Superman's lobotomized robots
Yeah.
and is serving in the house with the withered Wonder Woman. Lex meets up with President Kennedy because in the weird alternate timeline, Nixon's the one that gets assassinated, not Kennedy.
Yeah, it's
And
even kind of mentioned a couple of times, isn't it? Going, oh, the world would have been a much better place if Nixon hadn't been assassinated. And I thought that was quite a clever little line, but
and Kennedy is married to Marilyn Monroe, but I can't remember what
yeah,
her real name is.
Norma Jean.
There
Yeah,
you go.
yeah,
Um, and he tells him that aliens landed in Roswell,
yeah.
and they go to find what was at this special Area 51. And Lex finds the Green Lantern ship, ring, and lantern.
Yes,
So
yes.
that is how we leave issue 2. Where were you at this point?
It's hard because I'm actually gonna say I was further away from enjoying it than I was in issue one. I I think coming in and not being a fan of what they were doing with Batman, I think he got, or that part of the story got a lot of play in this, didn't it?
Mm.
And this felt like a middle chapter, but not an Empire Strikes Back middle chapter for me. This felt like something that was getting us from A to C, and a lot of that being what I think I was supposed to be getting, which is a load of, oh, isn't this cool? A kind of edgy, darker Batman against an edgier, darker Superman. And I don't know, that part just fell a bit flat for me. Although I will say I did love that Lasso of Truth part. I think Diana sacrificing herself to save Superman, but it felt a little bit more sinister than that, didn't it? It wasn't like
Mm.
she chose to kind of do this gesture. Superman was kind of like, "Come on,
Do it.
I know
Do it
this is going to
now.
hurt you, but do it because I'm done in if not." And it added some intrigue and overtones to their relationship. But yeah, that part of it a little bit flat. However, I did like, and what gave me hope, and it really gave me hope going into issue 3, was things like you said there, that integration, and I think in this one we got still some cheap pops on it, but we got a little bit more of that real history. So Kennedy being with Norma Jean, that the Nixon death, even, and I still wasn't liking Lex and Lois in here, but even when Lex and Lois are having a conversation about them and they're talking about them as if Kennedy and Marilyn Monroe are the lesser people because they're
Mm.
actually a farce, whereas obviously we know in the real world Kennedy was revered by many and still is revered, and obviously Marilyn Monroe was. But yeah, I thought there were some nice touches. I felt like this is where probably Mark Miller found his real sweet spot for the alternate universe and the alternate world part.
Mm.
But yeah, too much Batman.
See, because I wasn't a massive fan of the Batman we had at the beginning. There was way too much of it, and I didn't get why it needed to be there. You know, there was literally no real need for it other than going, well, it's Batman.
Yeah, yeah,
It could have been anyone that any villain could have taken that place. Any just some random Rush KGB agent could
or
have
for
done
me, as I
that.
said, like for that last issue, I think if Batman had been an American Batman, I think I'd have bought into it a little bit more. You know, carried on
Yeah,
that America Russia thing, and you know, like we do continue to get through this issue, the expansion of the Soviet Union, and maybe the the success of the Soviet Union in comparison to the decline of America. So you've got all that kind of rolling on, but I think for me that would give a an American Batman even more reason. You know, like he's there to sort of
mm,
fight injustice, and you could easily spin that into like the greatest injustice that he's seeing is that the rest of the world, and I'll use the term loosely, prospers, but probably just prospers relatively because America is in a massive decline and slump. And I think that would have given me reason enough to, or that would have given the Batman character reason enough to infiltrate Russia and do these things. Whereas,
yeah,
yeah, I don't know, I didn't buy it so much with what we got.
yeah. It is. It just felt well. We can use Batman, so let's use Batman. To me,
Yeah,
and
and you know you can kind of see why, can't you? Like you can see why they go, oh, I can do me Batman, Superman bit, and that will get the punters in, and it probably did. Um, but when you're kind of reading through it, yeah, it felt. I was gonna say it felt like. I'll hold what it felt like because I'll get to some of my feelings on this part of it later on. But yeah, I'll stick with the cheap pop. It's Mick Foley saying the hometown, isn't it? When he starts his
yeah.
promos, that's what this felt like.
The other thing that I did notice in this one, because the bit that you were on about with the showing of the decline of America, that's right at the beginning of issue 3, is
Oh
they
no, but they do
don't.
mention in here that it's
Yeah,
declining. They're saying that
yeah,
like Russia is, or the Soviet Union is getting bigger, and because you know when they're
yeah,
talking about Kennedy and Norma Jean, they're sort of you know I said about them doing it sort of farcical. It is America is slumping and becoming a little bit more a comedy. I mean, you could probably say it's becoming parallels to maybe where it got to with some of the Trumpian stuff, and I know the economy slightly boomed from, but you know that kind of it's a bit of a mockery of what it once was.
yeah. Um, but it's what I think they really missed in this was to show what Superman was doing with Russia, because the only thing we know
Yes.
is it's just expanded everywhere, but these two
Yes.
countries are part of the new Soviet Union.
Yeah. I,
But you're
I
not
want to see
seeing
what he's doing day to day.
has he fixed the hunger that was clearly the issue, which what is what made him want to be the leader.
Yeah.
Yes, we see him do the Superman saves burning buildings, Superman saves falling plane stuff. You know, you see there's one bit where he just shoots off to stop two trains hitting each other, and you get
Yeah.
that proper Russian pull on the thing that
Yeah.
looks like it should be on a Russian poster. But there's no, oh, look at what Superman has done for the masses
Yeah,
sort
you know,
of
you were
thing.
saying like Superman does Superman things. I wanted to see what Superman was doing when he wasn't doing Superman things. I wanted to, and I'm not saying I wanted 50 issues of him being in a meeting, but I
No,
kind of wanted some of that. I wanted to see that interaction with like how he's actually running the country, and as you say, the
are
repercussions
people
of that.
are the
Yeah,
food lines gone? Are
yeah,
and the thing is, you could have done that in one page over six,
yeah,
7 panels. You know, just you see like people in their houses with eating proper meals, or you know, people prospering in some way, shape,
yeah.
or form.
or,
You know,
or
it doesn't.
both. You know,
Yeah,
like you see that certain people are prospering while other people are struggling. Again, if you're going to do, I guess, a treaty on communism in general, oft the spoken about thing is that really can you create equality, and actually probably what happens is you have a lot of people suffering, but there still being a natural elite that are prospering within it, and going, is that what's happening in Superman's world, and is he just turning a blind eye to it because he's off doing Superman things, or he just wants to think that he's got this, and that he's better than Stalin was.
Yeah, it's that thing. It just did nothing
Yeah.
on that, which yeah, it's a little thing, but it takes me out of the story. There not being that there, because literally, at this point of it, is Superman really the hero, and are we really meant to care at this point? Because yes, he's still saving buildings and stuff, but he's not showing that he's made the world better,
Well, and
and
why? I think
he's been a dick to Lois.
there's a big why part there, I think, as well, isn't it? Of
Yeah.
going, when you've got this uber powerful person, and again, the narration I think is hinting at some of this, but you've got this uber powerful person who effectively can do anything, and yes, he may well be the president, the ruler of the biggest power in the world, but with all these powers, he's still stopping trains. Like, what could he have been doing with that? For all of that hunger, like, could he have fixed it, or did he fix it? And I mean, in my head, what I was thinking through this issue, and funny enough, goes back to something we were saying about that Guardians issue that we talked about. I think sometimes you start to write the story in your own head, and that's the story you want, and you don't necessarily get it. But this issue, much like the first, but I think this one even more so, I felt that there was a lot more meat on the bone, and I felt there was a lot more interesting meat on the bone, and instead I got things like the extended Batman fight, which wasn't very compelling for me. But yeah, feels like there's something at this stage. It feels like there's something great in here, but I'm not getting that great. I'm getting like nods to it and flavors of it and teases of it, but then probably not getting it because we're going into more kind of generic stuff that we'd see, like the Batman never fights Superman, although I think in subsequent years loads of times.
Yeah.
When we got to the end of the issue, we were talking on the last one about kind of how compelled were you to go forward. I was still compelled to go forward because I did think, okay, how does this all come together? Like, do we get the stuff I wanted from 1 and 2 in 3? But I more wanted to kind of focus on the end bit, as I say, like, oh sorry, as you said, they see the Green Lantern ship and the ring and that, and you also see that there's kind of an underground of Batman. Like, Batman hasn't gone away. There are now
Yeah.
Batmen. People are wanting to do that. You see Diana in the state that she is, as you said, being served by Piotr, and then the fact that Superman's withdrawing a bit and going to his fortress of solitude. And I'm thinking, like, as the teasers, let's say these are the teasers for what's to come. Okay, the Fortress of Solitude was interesting for me because I like the concept of it, and I liked the idea of going, is that what we're getting next? Is he going to start to remove himself from the human race, and is he going to lean into that more alien side? Is there something there? I liked the idea of picking up on Diana and the consequences of some of this stuff. I really wasn't interested to see kind of the idea of a Batman Underground coming out. I've already said the Batman part of this story's left me cold. No more, thank you. And I'll be honest as well. I love like the nods to other things. Green Lantern felt like a weak one. So you've already done Wonder Woman and Batman, and on the totem pole. No offense to Green Lantern or Green Lantern fans, but on the totem pole of the people you wanted to see or the concepts you wanted to see that were going to be big parts of the story, I think you'd have Green Lantern earlier than those. And I
Yeah.
feel like it's almost a bit of a damp squib of the Green Lantern stuff might happen compared to the fact that we've already seen Batman beaten and Wonder Woman effectively taken out.
Yeah. So we go into issue 3, and we jump forward, but we do get mini flashbacks of America falling and financially crumbling and capitalism being terrible.
I think there was a really good panel in this one, wasn't there?
There might have been a bit of a recreation of issue 1 of Superman.
Yeah, and I know I mock because I did it earlier, but we said earlier about kind of cheap pops and nostalgia and things like that. This was it done really well for me, because I just thought, what a great juxtaposition to what that cover initially was, and using that to push forward the bleakness and what's going on somewhere else. I did that for me. When we get to the end, we'll kind of obviously cover how it went, but for me, just so I make sure I do it now, that was the crowning glory moment for me for this whole series. I thought that was absolutely chef's kiss brilliant.
So we're brought up to the modern day, or is in this point 2001, because I think this came out in 2002. So sort of as close to as it was at that point, and Lex for president. We see that Lex has made wonderful things. He's fixed the economy, fixed infrastructure, fixed everything, and does it all within the first few months of being in office.
Yeah.
But his two greatest discoveries, the Phantom Zone, where he's gone to via a plane, where he has his own personal army of Green Lanterns.
And also
Led-
autonomy, isn't it? Like, because he's in the Phantom Zone, there's no threat that Superman can hear people talking with his super hearing and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So yeah, it really does allow them the ability to plan and to I guess not only plan but do secret machinations with people that like might come up later on without the fear of the Uber god Superman knowing about it.
Yeah. So, obviously, Green Lantern Corps are led by Colonel Jordan, Colonel Hal Jordan, just to get the which version we're getting in. And he realizes the ring is he can't use the ring, but this Green Lantern army that he's created can.
Very different version of Hal Jordan as well, isn't it? Hal Jordan
Yeah.
being somewhat of a, and had his moments, but somewhat of a clean cut pilot. And in this one, it is the fact that he was kept in a prisoner of war camp, isn't it? And despite kind of getting emaciated and everything, and treated badly over that period, very, very keys into how he used his imagination as to how he would get his revenge and create his own prisoner of war camp and imprison them all. And that's why he's
Yeah.
got such a vivid mind to be able to show his willpower and use his willpower. And I'll be honest, like, again, another highlight for me, these couple of pages where they show the origin of this Hal Jordan. I found that really interesting, dark but really, really interesting, and kind of I went, oh, a few more pages of this, please.
So we see that Lex goes off to the Palace of Solitude to meet with Superman, and Lex's vice president, or at least head advisor, is Brainiac. Brainiac's there and tells him not to fight with Superman, but does tell Superman that
It's
if
the other
Lex
way
wanted
round,
to,
isn't it? He's Superman's advisor.
oh yes, he is. He's
Yeah. And he says to Superman,
That
like,
he-
he almost says, "Don't speak to him," because he's level 9 intelligence, I think, is what he goes
Yeah.
with. That of going, he's 14 words away from talking you into killing yourself.
Yeah. We see that the First Lady Lois is in Paradise Island trying to forge alliances with the Amazons, who she gets it because the vengeful and pissed off Wonder Woman is now their leader and wants to take it back at Superman for what happened to her. Superman then decides he's going to attack America.
America.
Him taking the East Coast and Brainiac taking the West Coast. Off Superman goes and he gets in a fight with the Lantern Brigade.
Yeah.
The Amazon forces, commanded by Wonder Woman, then also come in, but they get fucked up fairly quickly by Superman.
Yeah, Superman's whooping in this, isn't he? Like those
Yeah,
lanterns, like have a brief moment of hope, but I think me as a reader, I was like, no, they're gonna get whooped within a page, and they do. And as you say, same thing for the Amazons. Uh, the brute force element of America's forces or America's allies are dispatched simply by Superman.
yeah. Lex then has his last weapon, which is a small note, um, which
Yeah, in the
basically,
pocket of Lois as well, wasn't
yeah,
it? The
in Lois's
crafty
pocket,
bugger.
note saying, "Why don't you just put the whole world in a bowl, Superman?" Superman orders Brainiac to end the invasion. However, Brainiac turns out that he was never under Superman's control. Plot twist. Swerve, in the words of Russo.
Yeah. Swerve, bro.
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 Uh, so instead, Brainiac attacks Superman with green radiation, which I was expecting is probably kryptonite.
Yeah, that's where I was
They
going with
they
that.
don't
Yeah.
they don't call it
I
by its
don't think
name,
it.
but
Yeah, I don't think they name it at any point. But yeah, that's where I was with it as well.
um, but randomly Lex turns off and disembogulates Brainiac from inside. Um, then is a issue with Earth singularity pulling. I don't know whether it's
Yeah,
some
I
sort
mean,
of
like
traction beam or
effectively, it starts
black hole.
akin to sort of a self destruct, but it's going to implode, and when it implodes, it would create a singularity, stroke black hole that would. I think they're very exact in it, but I think it was, let's say, a very vast distance will be wiped out. So at this point, you're going, okay, very vast distance wiped out. That this planet would go. It's over to you, Superman, to take care of this, please.
Yeah. So Superman, being Superman, shoots out into the abyss with Brainiac, and we get explode. And huzzah! Earth is saved by Superman. But that is not the end. Um, basically, the Soviet Union falls because of the lack of Superman, and instead of the United States of Russia, we have America taking over the whole of
America.
the world
Yep.
with massive amounts of capitalism. There was a bit where we got the Batman Vengeance Party trying to, having their riots. Um,
Whooped easily.
yep. And basically, Lex, in his amazement, cures every known disease. Everything is amazing. And goes on to colonize the solar system and
Yep.
lives for 1,000 years
Yes.
because everything's great under
Yeah.
Lex Luthor. We then obviously see that Lex has finally died, and at his funeral, we see Clark Kent, Superman in a suit, walking away quietly, and everyone's life sort of carries on, and we see that they are now technologically so advanced that everything is great. We
Yep.
bump forward probably. I mean, it says 1 billion years in the future at
Yeah.
that,
Yeah.
and Earth is basically falling apart, ripping itself to stresses from the red sun that is destroying the planet. And Lex's children, I'm guessing they were of the
I think
bloodline.
children's children. I'm sure
Children.
there's a bit in there that kind of
Yeah.
like starts laying out like the lineage.
And they have a baby son who they want to save from the impending death of the world and planet and universe. So they put him in a time ship and send him back to 1938 Ukraine.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that is how we end. So we'll break this into two parts. We'll do up to the fight with Brainiac and the suspected death of
Yep.
Superman, and then the post credits after that.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
what were your thoughts on the big, epic final battle for all of humanity?
So for the kind, like the Amazonians, the lanterns, and all that sort of things. Again, damp squib, but I don't think they took too many pages over it. And in reality, as much as I say it's a bit of a damp squib for me, it probably rang the truest because you go, yeah, Superman will put these people,
Yeah,
and I probably wouldn't buy them doing anything else. The build up to kind of this part, one of the things that I really liked in this issue is, and of course time has passed again, but Lex is Lex at this point, isn't he? Lex
yeah,
has got more portly, he's bald. So as much as he becomes more familiar to Lexes that we've seen portrayed before physically, Superman is, I think, at his most dramatic difference here. So there's still that old school kind of look to him, but that it's an old school, much more Russian and darker. So, and not that those two things are connected, but he feels more Soviet in his design, but also, his eyes are quite gaunt now at this point, aren't they? And they're darkened around that, and he looks, I guess, somewhere between evil and world weary. And
yeah.
I think visually, this issue, and I like the art all the way through it, but this one took a real upturn for me. And I think the battle was almost the bit of fluff to get you to what the real point was, wasn't it? Which is the Lex and Superman story, and
Yeah.
like how that fight kind of takes place, and it was never going to be fisticuffs, but yeah. We'll get to it in a minute, but I'm going to say this is my favorite issue. But even in this, my favourite issue, I felt like there was a lot of padding here, a lot of padding around the getting the troops together for what was,
A few panels.
and you
Fight.
needed it because I think like the payoff to the big battle doesn't happen
Hmm.
unless you have the big battle. But I don't know, it was all kind of there, wasn't it? Like those few pages at the end of the issue before kind of suggested to me where that battle was going to go, who would be the combatants at the end, and I don't think I needed quite so much, padding and fleshing out of how they got there.
Yeah, it. You know those that you get those films that take ages to build up, and then you get your payoff is literally like, oh shit, we've only got 5 minutes of runtime left. We need to pay everything off.
You mean
It,
most modern movies?
yes,
Yeah,
it just stank of that sort of pacing where they just kept going, oh, there's and we need to explain this bit
yeah.
and
Here's
explain
six
this
hundred
bit.
million to make me a 2.5 hour movie. If it had a lot of that to it, didn't it?
Yeah, and it was. You said we Superman had to basically walk through the Amazonians and the Green Lantern Corps to prove a point of that he's Superman. But the whole thing with Brainiac ended up just being a bit of a damp squib that Lex just deactivates him from inside, and it's just. And then, oh yeah, so we need the big payoff. Off you go because he's going to implode and destroy everything. So Superman sacrifices himself, which I get is probably a very common trend in Superman stuff. As I said, we don't read a lot of it, so I can't say that it's going to the well, but it
Yeah.
does think of going to the obvious of the giant sacrifice.
Oh, earlier in this issue, there's a section which is one of my favourite sections of the series, and as I say, there is some stuff I really love in this series. And there's a section where, and I'm going to say Might or whatever sort of bug it was, gets into the bottle city of Stalingrad because Superman didn't check the filters. Oh, we've all done that in our time. But the loss of life and what that really meant to him, and it really kind of keys in. And I know it could be seen as a bit of clumsy foreshadowing for what I'm going to kind of pick up on. But the fact that he actually really does care about his citizens, and this being his biggest failure, he's never been able to figure out how to reinstate that, and hence why I think he leans towards getting Brainiac in. I think it was with that kind of altruistic idea of going, maybe by having Brainiac on side, I can ultimately do that. But when you say about the fight with Brainiac, the fight with Brainiac is exactly the same for me as the fight with the Amazonians and the Green Lantern Corps. It's not a fight. It's to get you to the point, and or sorry, to get me to the point. And I think it's to get me to the point of a bit of writing that I think is fantastic, and I think there's a lot of similarities along the way with this of going. I think this would have been even more fantastic if it was done in a singular 50-page issue or something like that. And it was Lex taking out Brainiac so simply. Superman to sacrifice himself. Again, it wasn't the point. It was for that scene where Lex goes, and maybe 42 years ago, this was my plan. Checkmate. And I thought that was amazing. I thought that was absolutely amazing. Like the showing that, and whether it's true or not, but let's go with it is true for the purpose of this, is that like all those years ago, he kind of saw that he had this insurmountable person, and he probably needed to get him to the point where they could get a threat that was so big he would sacrifice himself, and Lex would ultimately convince him to kill himself. And things like with the note of the you might as well put him in a bottle, all of that stuff to lead him to that mental state where he realizes that maybe he's not brilliant for the world and he's just doing what Brainiac did. But effectively, rather than put him in a bottle, he's ruling it rather than having it in a bottle. And I just thought that was such an amazing payoff. Lex effectively winning while Superman being allowed to be the hero.
Yeah.
And that's where I'll stop talking about that bit, because I think when we go beyond that, I then have more to say on that as a concept. But that's why I don't mind that Brainiac fight, because the Brainiac fight's inconsequential. It is all about Lex and Superman, and Lex kind of getting his moment of going, yeah, I won. I beat you. And
Yeah.
he did beat him. But also Superman got to do Superman things.
Yeah. So post blow up.
Yes. Yes. Yes.
I know you said earlier about with Miller, he sometimes gets up his own ass and seems to like the smell of his own farts.
Yeah.
This ending, and a spoiler for overall thoughts, this ending fucks this for me. I hated this at how the whole the future bit where Lex becomes some sort of demigod, cures everything, utopia, fine.
Yeah.
But then his kids sending
Yeah.
sending Superman back. Just you get to that point like there is just why.
Yeah.
It doesn't benefit the story. It doesn't further anything. It just basically, I get this is Elseworlds and standalone stuff and all that, but it basically makes it all pointless because it technically then fucks itself, because there's no way, if you then go back to the beginning, how does Lex know the things that he knows about Superman to then, because if you'd have then gone, oh, there was some way that Lex sort of sent something to himself, or Lex was the one that took the corpse, the fucking Green Lantern thing down to himself, and he found it that way. But it just, ugh.
I wasn't really expecting to go like down this part of it, but I fear that you're spiraling here in kind of time travelopia, like, because it can happen, can't it, when you've got
Yeah.
stories that kind of loop time and things like that. I agree with you. I really don't like that ending. I think it's weak. I think it's weak, overindulgent, and but we can overindulge in a way that I think I was supposed to go, oh, that's clever. But rather than going, oh, that's clever, I just kind of went, oh, didn't really need that. But yeah, I don't have I have the problems with it from that level. I don't have the problems with it that I think you're having. But I think I think you're ascribing a little bit too much to it. I think ultimately it's as simple as um, when you get to that point in the future and the world is ending, they make a decision to send the baby back in time. Um, the end. I don't think it has any problems. I don't think Lex needs to know anything. I don't think any of that. It doesn't matter. That is because that's the story as it always was. Because that's been happening endlessly in time, and that's when you get into time travel stuff. But yeah, I don't really kind of get the idea that Lex would have to know something. No, I don't see it. But I just thought it was, a word I've used a few times in this. I felt like, do you know what the ending felt like to me? It felt like the ending of Tim Burton's Planet of the Apes rather than the ending of Planet of the Apes. It felt like a bit of a, oh my God, and that's what you went with for the end? That's just a bit pish.
Mm. Yeah, and the thing is, see, it just didn't need it.
No.
It just didn't need it.
So like, I mean, in that kind of ending bit, it's very, very close to, I think, how I feel about this as a whole. There were some bits I loved. I loved the idea of Lex leading the world to posterity, and like, let's be honest, posterity for a long, long time. And not that I've ever really wanted a Lex redemption arc, but I liked it because I think this is something that other writers have touched on before, and I think this is done well here of going, if Lex didn't have Superman to fixate on, or in the case of this, if Lex beat Superman
mm,
and got that monkey off his back, that thing that's always been tearing him up, what could Lex do? And in that world, Lex creates I mean, it's kind of portrayed as a perfect world, so let's go with it. It's a perfect world. And I love that. I love the fact that, the payoff for this is Superman, the super powerful, with really good intentions, had the chance to run the world and didn't run it into the ground, but got more fixated on just doing good for the common man. Whereas if Lex can get rid of his demons, he can further everyone. Absolutely fantastic. And then I flip a page and see that when Lex dies, Clark's there. And I just went, no, he died.
yeah,
He died when Brainiac died, and I guess there's some parallels to like what we get in things like the Dark Knight Rises and things like that. But I think sometimes just let him die. Don't have that moment. I didn't need it. And maybe some people did. Maybe some people thought, oh well, him and Lois can have a few years together, maybe, or not, whatever it may be. But I quite liked it when Superman sacrificed himself because that's what Superman does, and I kind of
yeah,
hated that cheap. He's come back, and yeah, as I say, then we get to that final stretch of the let's try and be, I think, a bit cocky and go, aha, and this will always happen, and this will perpetually happen because he landed on here because all this story has happened before, and they send him back in the past, and you're in this loop. And I went, doesn't really add anything to it. And when I say doesn't add anything to it, sometimes by adding something, you can almost subtract by adding, can't you?
yeah,
Because you go, I think it kind of just leans away from some of the themes that were more interesting. And yeah, you stop this before Lex's funeral, or you have Lex's funeral without the Superman stuff, and you just maybe get a page of going prosperity. Even if you'd had it where you fast forward a billion years and you see a red sun, you could almost go, oh my God, like, is history repeating itself in that way? So ultimately, is
yeah,
Krypton us? And that I would have stomached more. That for me would have been the Planet of the Apes non-Tim Burton version ending.
yeah.
But yeah, as I say, instead I got the Tim Burton version.
So thoughts overall on this as
Oh,
a complete.
do you want to go first? Because I realised I just talked ad nauseum for a
Yes.
little bit there. So yeah.
Um. So yeah, the first couple of issues had me on an intrigue level. I wouldn't say this was oh my fuck, this is amazing, but there was enough nuggets there to intrigue me to carry on. I
Yeah,
was like, oh, what and as I said, there was that. It has massive faults in the first two issues, where it's just like, for me, why are we not seeing his what Soups is doing for Russia as the
yeah,
leader? Why are we not seeing a bit in issue one what Stalin's idea is and how it should work in his thing? You know, why should we care that he's Russian and running the Soviets?
yeah,
The whole Batman thing could have just fucked straight off. That doesn't add anything at all. But I was like, yeah, I get, as I said, it's cheap pop. I get it. It makes sense for, oh, look, we've got Batman and Superman together. Get
yeah,
you people in the shop sort of thing. And then the third issue, I'm like, you've done it. You've done a clever thing there with that end, with the whole Brainiac, Superman off into space, blow up. Luthor creates a utopia, and
yeah,
shows, as you say, shows what he could do if he didn't have the the fight with Superman constantly. And as I said, if it had been there, Lex's death finished, done, I think I'd be a little bit more positive on it than I am. But it then falls off the fucking, as I said, falls off the cliff with that ending. I It doesn't make me want to read more Superman. This is the thing with this. This was why we went with
yeah.
a one and
God, that
done
was going to be
sort of
one of
story.
my questions after as well. Of going, how does this make you feel about reading more Superman?
Said because we had a couple that we were throwing about before we decided on doing Red Sun, and this, with how this ends and the fact of it, Superman does Superman things, but for what reason we don't see, and then just Superman's a bit of a dick for no reason. It doesn't make me, as someone who's not a massive Superman fan and doesn't and I've not read a lot, care or want to find out more about this character.
Yeah,
And I get it. It's Elseworld. It's a one-off, and it's standalone. It's what they want to do with it. But the only person in this that I'm like, I wonder if they could do something good with him if they took him away from Superman and do like a whole completely standalone thing of is Lex. Lex is the only character in this that I'm like, I'd be intrigued to see what they could do with him in a sort of him not being around Superman and being either a bad guy or a good guy, either
yeah,
way, but not having, oh look, I've got a giant suit with Krypton. Because basically what they do with Brainiac is they go, oh look, he's got kryptonite. They go that and Red
the only
Sun.
thing
There
I'll
you go,
I'll
another
say on
suit.
that though is they did wait 3 issues to do that. I mean, I
They
think
did.
as much as I much and I will like go on in a minute to talk about like kind of cheap pops and things like that. I do think
They didn't go straight to the well.
a less brave one would have been introduce kryptonite in issue one and that be the peril for 3 issues. I thought
Yeah,
they were reserved to hold it off for as long as they did.
but yeah, it's as I said, it just doesn't. It doesn't make me go, oh, let's go smash into small Superman.
Yeah,
So
which I guess is a standalone. You'd hope that it would, wouldn't you?
yeah,
And again, you say Elseworlds and a singular story, but yeah, I think in essence, even though there aren't more stories or there isn't a monthly of the Russian Superman, yeah, its premise, its core should probably make you want to buy more of that character. Like kind of, I guess my wrap up on it is I think the art's amazing throughout. I think it's gorgeously drawn. I think conceptually, I think what they do with the art is great. It's got a very similar feel throughout, but you can tell when those errors change, and you can tell when there's stuff happening in the world, and it never feeling jarring. Within that, I mean, there's a couple of bits like the kind of Batman redesign where it was a Batman but with a furry hat on. You know, maybe a couple of bits were phoned in, but I'll forgive them for how great I thought it looked throughout, and also the aging of the characters throughout. I think I always felt like I knew who the character was before someone had to say their name or they spoke because like they aged them particularly well. So art gorgeous, and go back to what we said at the start. The premise I think is fantastic. As an Elseworlds, and I'm not an Elseworlds guy. Starting to kind of get into Black Label, which I guess is the new Elseworlds, but I'm not so much of the like, oh, mirror universe, what if da 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 da. It's not always my bag, but this one had an interesting enough premise. Like you though, I think I probably wanted something different. I think I probably wanted a bit more of a realistic portrayal of the world and the politics of the time, and for to see a lot more of that, see the impacts on the people, see. I kind of want to know why Superman didn't fix everything, or what he tried and things like that. Like the stuff he was doing when he wasn't Superman. And I guess this is the poop sandwich version of it, because I'm going to go to what I really didn't like, and then I'll finish it off with what I really did like. I really didn't like its over reliance on, I think, kind of summer blockbuster tools, cheap heat, clickbaity stuff of, oh look, here's Russian Batman, here's a Green Lantern, here's this, here's that, and I think unfortunately, I think on page count and story content, I think that hits around 60 to 70% of the content for me, which is too much. And it soured my experience of it. And we said earlier, I'm with you. Really don't like the ending, but there's still some great stuff in here. I think when this is good, this is really good. We talked about sort of some of the good uses of the concept, some of the individual panels, some of the choices, some of the characters that were used. You know, focusing on Kennedy and Norma Jean. As much as I hated Lex Luthor early on in it, and I do think Lex Luthor early on in it doesn't make me think of Lex Luthor at the end of it. I don't necessarily see him progressing to that, but I love the end of it. You know, I love ultimately what is the culmination, like the Lex Superman battle and the Lex winning. And so yeah, I think at its core, I think when this is good, I think it's really good. Too often it isn't, and I kind of wish that this had been 50 pages, and we could have minimized some of that chuff or the clickbaity bits, and maybe the other stuff, the really good stuff, would have shone through better.
I said this could have been a really good one and done. It's a sort of go a 70-page count. You know, so half the size of what it is, because 150, 160 pages in total.
Yeah.
You know, you could have done it and had a nice tighter experience there. But you're right. When it is good, it is very good, and it is very fucking pretty. The art is pretty the whole way through this, which is the one thing that did keep me going when I was like, but it's very pretty to look at. Yeah, it wasn't one of those of where the story's sucking and the art's appalling. Look at you, Nightfall. Where, you know, it's a chore to do it.
There's bloated. There's me moaning about 150 pages feeling bloated. 3 bloody monster trades is bloated, isn't it? I mean, there's a movie, there's an animated version of this, and I would watch it if it was on any of my services for free, because I'd be quite interested to see whether they vary at all on that. But I mentioned the movie of it because something that you just said there kind of triggered a thought in my head. And going back to what I said about Mark Miller, I think when Mark Miller is brilliant, he is brilliant. Sometimes, yeah, he can get a bit carried away. This feels like when a director who you used to love their stuff of starts making movies and they're so, I guess, famous or popular that no
Yeah,
one dares tell them don't do that bit. And
yeah,
this is kind of what this project feels to me, or feels like for me, for Mark Miller. Of, I think if someone maybe had tapped him on the shoulder and went, "Don't do that bit; it'll just be better." However, I'm saying all that of going, I think it would make a better story. I don't know whether it would. This is really well reviewed. It's quite widely loved and adored. Every time you kind of read a review, it tends to be really strong. It actually was up for the Eisner Award the year that it come out as one of the best limited series, and I think partly when I read it, I was surprised. And this sounds more mean than I probably mean it to, but I was kind of like, wow, that must have been a low end year for limited series. And not because it's that
mm,
bad. I don't think it's not bad, but it doesn't feel like award worthy for me.
mm,
But for all of that, as much as I'm saying like, I think it's overinflated and he maybe get a bit carried away, I do wonder if you strip out Batman and Green Lantern and all of those kind of nods to things, whether it many people would have bought it. And
true.
ultimately, that's in the game, aren't they? They're in the game of selling comics, and I'm always of going go with your strongest stories. But yeah, I don't know. Like, would people like it so much? There is a big audience for that side of it, and I just think that
Mm,
maybe the bits that maybe a wider audience love were the bits that left me cold.
yeah,
However, I would read more Superman after this, partially for exactly the same reason as you kind of go, oh, yeah, I'm not so bothered after reading this. I want to see what other creators do with it now. I want to see whether, forget the Russian side of it and the American side of it, is this indicative of Superman stories? Is it almost really hard to stick the landings because of how powerful he is? And
mm,
yeah, so I will be back for more Superman, but not necessarily because this made me thirst for the character. I think it just made me more curious to see maybe in other limited series what other creators I like have done with him. So is this a Superman problem or a Mark Miller problem or a combination of the two? And maybe by seeing
mm.
some other creative teams tackle Superman, I might get a better gauge of that for me.
So down there, if you are a Superman fan, any limited
Super
season
fan.
series that you would suggest for us to jump on
Yeah.
next? Because this isn't me going, "Oh, I'm never going to read Superman." It's just pushed it further down the thing of finding something new and Superman to read.
Yeah. Yeah.
Whereas I came out of it was one of the ones that you sent me. It was I can't remember what it was, but it was one of the paperbacks that you sent me last year, and I read the first one and then went and bought the second one because just like it just grabbed me straight away. And I was intrigued by it,
Invincible?
and yes, that's the one. It's that sort of thing of where you can get something, you just go, oh, I need this
Give me
now.
more. Feed
Yeah,
me more, as Ryan Back would have said.
but yeah, this
Sorry,
this
CM Punk.
this doesn't make me want more.
No.
Not yet, anyway. So as
Also, I was
always,
going to say in the comments as well, if you've read other Elseworld stuff, as I say, I don't naturally gravitate towards Elseworld stuff. I'm a bit of a continuity kind of boy, but if there are other Elseworld series that you think has we've said how interesting we found the premise, that have premises like this where maybe you feel like, I'm going to say sort of stuck the landing or stuck to it a little bit more. But I guess
mm,
if you're watching this and you love this, you might go, well, this stuck the land as well, dickhead. But yeah, other Elsewhere world's properties where that hook is a really compelling and interesting hook.
yes. So as always, YouTube things like subscribe, ring bells, all those bits and pieces up there. As we said, comments down there. And until next week, goodbye.